is next steps for, I don't even know, first steps for...
Baby steps.
Baby steps for City Hall, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn this over to Christy and her staff. And today we're hoping that, as we've had multiple conversations about City Hall over multiple years, that maybe it's an opportunity for the council to land on a couple of important policy pieces for that. And so that's what we're hoping out of this work session, which then allows us to continue to move forward on what is really an important project. And we think we've actually come up with a fiscally responsible way to help us move forward, particularly in these economic times. And so we're hoping that you're open to that as we move forward. So, Christy?
Mayor, Council, thank you for inviting us here today to talk about continuing the discussion regarding City Hall. I want to also thank Otto Patisha from the University of Oregon and the architecture students. Each of you received a booklet with the project from the exercises that they did in the fall, and we're just really appreciative of the energy and enthusiasm they put into that project. And
if I could just interrupt, because people here don't know, but we had before the meeting actually began, we had a brief sort of look at a lot of those projects.
Yeah.
And so appreciated that opportunity. Thank you for coming.
So the City Hall is sort of what I think of as a big problem looking for a solution. And we've been talking about finding a solution to addressing the building deficiencies, the safety issues, and just the ongoing needs that we have for delivering services to the community in a structure that works for the way that we provide service. About 11 years ago, we headed down this path, and we had a big problem, again, looking for, when you think about solving a big problem, we think about finding a big solution. And one of the things that we found is there was great work that came out of a lot of public process and great ideas for how we could move forward with consolidation of the services for City Hall. But the price tag and the scope was just too big for council and community to support. And so what we've done is spent a lot of time thinking about how we could do this differently to accomplish our goals. Today, one of the things that we're going to talk to you about, Mike Penwell and I are both here today, and he'll go into a lot more detail than I will. But today we're here to talk about how we could continue down a path of a small series of solutions to get us to achieving what we need to for our bigger objectives. Thinking about the three-legged stool model, if you think of City Hall in the path that the city manager has proposed as simple, achievable, and financially responsible. Simple in the fact that we can actually move forward with something that makes sense. We can break it into parts of phasing the work into achievable, manageable chunks and address and prioritize how we do the work. It's achievable. We have funding set aside. We've been dedicating for the purpose of rebuilding and addressing the City Hall deficit or deficiencies, and we have that funding available, so it's something that we can move on at a fairly quick rate. And it's financially responsible. During the past two budget cycles, you've heard the city manager speak a lot to living within our means and using one-time dollars for one-time purpose. And this is a great example of a project that requires one-time dollars. One of the things that we can do by living within our means and using the existing resources that we have available is to not put additional burden on a community by needing to go out for a bond measure or to go into debt to finance this project. And so what we're proposing is again, living within our means, building some sort of a phased approach to going forward. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Mike Penwell to go into some more detail.
Okay. Thanks, Christy. Nice to see you all again for first time this year for me. Councillor Farr, nice to see you back. And thank you. Seeing you reminds me we were talking about this when you left, and we're still talking about it when you come back. But I do, for the folks keeping score at home, do want to mention that we have made some progress. We're not just sitting around doing nothing. And just wanted to remind you that in 2000, we moved the 911 center out of City Hall over to 2nd and Chambers, accomplished that. In 2001, we got the police personnel out of the basement, property and forensics, and over to a new facility on North Garfield. The downtown fire station at 13th and Willamette was done in 2005, and our latest accomplishment is acquiring the building at 300 Country Club Road, and in a little less than a year from now, we should have all of our police officers over there in a safe, adequate building. And to me, that's the key to the whole thing, because the police part was the toughest nut to crack with the whole thing with City Hall because of the essential facility seismic requirement. And that also brings us to a tipping point where it's realistic and doable to get everyone else out of City Hall now. And with the impending deadline of eWeb STEAM coming, it's important that we make decisions and move forward in a timely manner so that we can be out ahead of that. And so we've put together some ideas of how to move forward with the first phase of a multi-phase City Hall, and that's the recommendation we have here today. We also have taken a look at, as you know, during City Hall master planning, at a big comprehensive solution. One of the things we actually learned from that whole process was not trying to bite off more than we can chew, but doing something that's more affordable with the resources that we have. We also took a look at the eWeb option, and while it's less expensive than a comprehensive new City Hall here, it's still beyond our means, and we also believe it's not in the right place. And so that brings us back to this site again, and have continued to come back and land on this site as the appropriate spot. We own it, and it makes it a lot easier to move forward incrementally with a full block site and using it a portion at a time. And so we're asking you today to give us the direction to move forward on emptying out City Hall and to begin to tear it down and to come back with a financial plan to implement the first phase of a multi-phase City Hall. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you for that. Just a couple things that I wanted to say is I really appreciate this approach. It feels doable. And I actually think this has been way too long unresolved. And it's, as you know, I've been carping about this for a long time. And I've really felt actually a real huge responsibility about the people who are in this building when we acknowledge that it doesn't even meet the most basic of safety standards. And then today I have an extra sensitivity about that given what we've seen happen in this world. And we know that the area that we live in is particularly vulnerable to seismic events. So it seems like it's only responsible for us to, if we know that our current situation puts people who work here and those who are visiting here in danger at a scale that is beyond an acceptable level, I think it's really an important time. Even this feels like we have to move too slowly, but at least we'll be moving, which would make me feel better, and getting people into safer work situations. So, and then the STEAM issue just makes it from a practical point of view, we're going to have to change the way we our energy usage anyway. So we really everything coming together at a time to say this is the moment that we need to try to address this need for the people who work here and for the community. So appreciate it very, very much. Let's open this up for discussion. And yes, George, you can start.
I get to be first?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. I just have a couple of questions about when does the steam conversion take place? What's our absolute drop-dead date on the steam conversion?
June of 2012 is still the plan, although eWeb's actually ahead of schedule on that plan. And so as customers come off, the remaining customers carry the cost, so the cost of steam will rise exponentially between now and then, but it's due to be turned off in June of 2012.
Okay. That was one of the follow-up questions I had about what happens to the cost up until then. And then what is the estimated cost to convert? If we were to keep the building the way it is now, what is the estimated cost to the city to convert over from the steam?
Just replacing the steam with new boilers is about a $500,000 project. But keep in mind, we've got a 47-year-old HVAC system, and so the whole thing needs to be replaced. If we're going to do that, we need to start replacing the exterior envelope. We have uninsulated concrete block walls, single glazing, and as I've brought analyses to you in the past, fully renovating this building is a $30 to $50 million proposition, and once you start, you really have to go pretty far down that path to keep this building moving forward.
Okay. I, too, like the phased approach. It serves a couple of purposes. One, it allows us to show the people that we're trying to do the best job we can as far as being good stewards of public funds by not, like Mike said, not biting off more than we can chew at one time. By moving people out of City Hall, it helps us meet our obligation to the deals that we've made as far as renting space in some of the new buildings that are going in. I'm not looking for a Taj Mahal. I'm looking for something that's attractive, that's economical, and that's actually efficient to use. So, I'd like to see that happen. I want to see us consolidate all the city services that we can in one facility, so it makes it easier for people to do business with the city, so they don't have to go 6 different places. So I'm really in favor of the phased approach, and the sooner that we get started on this, the better. And unfortunately, after reading the materials that we got in reference to the evaluation on the EWEB property, I hate to disagree with my friend Mike Clark, but I don't think that would be a wise decision to go any farther with that. I think that the staff did a good job doing an evaluation on that, at least as far as I'm concerned, and gave me enough information to make a reasonable conclusion that that's not, I don't think putting City Hall is the best idea in the riverfront, the EWEB property. I think that it can be developed into something more useful and more beneficial to the city overall.
Thank you. George Brown?
Thank you. I've got a few questions. I too favor this site. I like the EWEB. I like the EWEB buildings. It's a beautiful site, but it's just out of the center of things. It's just it's off center. It'd be kind of difficult for people to get there. I think this is the place where this is the closest to the center of town, and it's a whole city block. We should be able to. I haven't totally abandoned the idea of renovating this and expanding on this building, but no matter what we do, I really think this is probably the way to go. So my questions are, let's say, well, we know where the police department's going. What I'd kind of like to see, and I don't have to have exact figures today, but I'd kind of like to know, who's going to move out and what are their square footage requirements? Can they be accommodated in the Bennett filling of the pit project down there on Willamette Street? I think we're responsible for 26,000 square feet there. So I'm just curious, what are the square footage needs of the remaining departments after the police? And then who all would move back into the new one? Might be years down the line. Till we build a new one, would people move from the it's probably not even all planned out yet, but anyway, I just like to know what the current thinking is and what the space requirements, how big the new one would be, and who all would move back in, what their square footage requirements are. I think might help us, with our thinking on that.
And we'll be able to get back to you as we continue to have more conversations.
Sure.
Start to plan for this particular facility. We'll have more information, be able to keep giving you updates in our current thinking.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just out of curiosity, did Professor Poticha and his students provide any cost estimates along with their excellent drawings of what this building would look like? I didn't notice any in the material that
It
they
wasn't
left with.
included in there. I think he did a quick analysis that was somewhere around 30-40 million.
Yeah, it's in the typewritten stuff that we handed
Oh,
out.
okay.
And that's, I believe that's construction cost only, correct?
That's construction cost.
And so soft costs would add another, 30-35% to that.
Right. Okay, thank you. And how much is left in the facility reserves? About
$6 million.
$6 million. Okay. And then, are there any other one-time funds available?
There are one-time funds that, one of the ways that we acquired the facility reserve is by looking at sale of surplus property, lawsuits that were settled and things like that, telecom dollars. And so we'll be looking for, what we're proposing today is that we come back to you. Sue Cutsa-George is going to, if we receive direction, work on the financing for the $8 to $10 million. There are places where we feel that we can capture the one-time funding to accomplish our goal of that.
Okay. And also, I'm just kind of curious about federal grants, like maybe, for seismic retrofitting or upgrading of contributing to a new building. I mean, I believe that Las Vegas got a whole bunch of federal money when they built their city hall, right? So does anyone know about that?
Our emergency manager does keep an eye on those kinds of things and makes me aware of them when they come along. And so far, there hasn't been anything that we could apply to this building or particularly to new construction. We have gotten a grant for one of our fire stations to bring it up to seismic, and we've applied for a grant to help with the seismic costs at the new police facility as well, but we haven't received word on that. So we are always looking at those opportunities.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all.
Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to first say thank you both to Mike and to Christy for the hard work and the excellent analysis piece here. I had a chance to meet with Christy the other day, too, and talk about the work that she did to speak with the eWeb staff on this, and I really appreciate all the hard work. My hope in having brought this up in our previous discussion prior to Pat being here was that the rest of the council would see some of the things that, and see and hear some of the things that I saw and heard when I went to the eWeb's board meeting and they had the discussion of this with their staff, because I think there was some degree of information presented by their staff that met with further questions and perhaps some I don't want to characterize what they said about their staff information, but I know that the board had a different sentiment, and they came out of that meeting with a unanimous vote to come back and look at options that explore selling this to us. Now, I recognize that the votes are not here at the table to continue to pursue this option, so I won't give you a big list and keep fighting it. But I will say that based on the information that I've had from others, from board members, the input that I've had from members of the community across the political stripe, across the socioeconomic and geographic stripe in our community, I think there's a lot more support for us to consider more fully eWeb as a potential City Hall site than we're giving credit to. And I do believe that eWeb will eventually move out of that building, and one day we will still wonder, what if we'd been able to do that when we're having a potential argument about what that building is going to become. So I will just, I suppose, respectfully disagree with my colleagues that we should give up on that option.
Okie dokie. Chris.
Thanks. Actually, I think that is a really good point to make. I don't think that eWeb is a bad idea. In fact, I could say that under other circumstances, it's a great idea. It would be a good place. It's, for me, the consideration that this block, this site, is just this much better than the eWeb site. So it's not eWeb's bad. eWeb's good, but this site, I think, is just a little bit gooder. And so I think we have to take that into consideration. And so I'm inclined to be willing to go where looks like we're trying to go today. But as I've always maintained all along, if we're willing to move into the trailer, we got to make sure we're actually going to build the new building and not stay permanently in the trailer. So I'm back to what George was talking about, is I really want to be very thoughtful about what is the phasing strategy and the realism of the phasing strategy for how we would get back into a city hall. And I'm hopeful, and I have the sense that we're trying to work very realistically to what we can actually achieve. Because I don't want us, well, we have to evacuate this building. I'll use the word evacuate instead of just vacate. But
Hopefully we'll agree.
But what we do here, I think, is a very important consideration after we leave the building. And I was really impressed with what Otto's class did. I mean, I love it when architecture students work very realistically on something and try to come up with a good idea. And while I don't know ultimately whether this can be incorporated or not, or whether we need to do a we need to do a phase structure. We need to build this deliberately. But exactly how that might come out is still something that I would love to have some more conversation around. But I think the points we can make today is this full square block in downtown Eugene that we already own really is a viable option. Always has been the viable option for me. And I really want to see the best possible city hall that is reasonable and prudent on that location. But for me, the biggest deciding factor is we have to be absolutely realistic about what we can do. There cannot be any pie in the sky or fantasy about what we hope we can do here. It's got to be grounded. And I think we can get there. But this is the best hope we've had for years of actually being able to do something downtown on City Hall in a reasonable way. And so I'm kind of excited by that.
Andrea?
Well, I'll just not talk about my thoughts about eWeb because it really doesn't, it's not going to go forward, so it's not, I don't want to take our time talking about it. What I do want to say, though, is I do appreciate Otto's presentation. You know, I was looking at it and thinking, you know, that isn't such a bad idea, but it's not that it's going to grab me because I think that, I think about the new buildings that I've witnessed come up in the last few years, and the whole theory of how business is done is totally different. The capsulated offices and the foyers and the big expansive areas are gone. It's a new day. People are thinking leaner and greener, and people work together on projects. It's just different the way business is done today. And so I'm kind of excited about thinking about a new building that would allow our employees to work together from, you know, across different service lines, you know, giving, you know, John has, and I've heard of other projects where, you know, you pull people together from different parts of the city to work on a project that none of them have any expertise in, and you get some really good ideas out of that, and I think that that's really exciting. So I'm looking forward to supporting the motion and moving forward.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. First, you know, when I look at this that was presented by Dr. Patitra and his students, it makes me realize how great of a resource we have in the University of Oregon and all the amazing talent that is centered at the University of Oregon. What a great thing. Whether or not it fits all of our needs, it certainly is. I really thank you for this. It's great. Thank you. The last time the council talked about this, I was sitting in that chair in the back corner, and I had no recourse. I couldn't say anything other than I was able to write a little bit of an article that was picked up by the Register Guard. And my feelings haven't changed since then. I quoted Councillor Pryor on the trailer concept, and I quoted Councillor Brown on building up from here, and quoted a number of other folk on it. But my feelings remain the same, and I think the city manager is going in the right direction with this, prescribing a gradual rebuilding of City Hall, you know, and making it a safe place to operate. I do believe that eWeb is a viable site. I agree with Councilor Clark on that. I think a couple of things, a couple of conditions exist there. For instance, adequate place for the council to meet. Adequate and council chambers is really an issue. May seem a little bit self-serving, but it serves the entire community. So, you know, demolish the existing structure, itemize the hierarchy of needs, and build while we live in a trailer. So, thank you.
So, George Poland's in the queue. There's we both Councilor Taylor and Councilor Zelenka are not with us today. Councilor Zelenka was going to join us, but I think he had some snarl in his travel, so he's not here. Just a couple of thoughts about this. One is, I'm sure it would happen anyway, but I just want to say that whatever it is we build, I just want it to be of materials that we can keep up nicely.
Low maintenance.
No painted.
Given the experience we've had with the wrapping of this building, it's been a real challenge. And I'm also sort of interested in taking some of those ideas that sort of try to capture some of the architecture of this building in a new and more modern way, so that we don't lose some of what's special about that too. So interested in both those things. Is that Councilor Zelenka? So, welcome. Is there anything?
Thank you.
We're just almost finishing our rounds here on the City Hall. Did you have anything you wanted to put into the conversation right now?
No, I support the city manager's recommendation and moving forward and with the plan.
Okay, thank you. The only final comment that I would make is that I know that we routinely are looking for grants, but I actually think if we're trying to do something that captures some of what federal dollars are interested in terms of this project, we may have more of an ability than we normally would. So I'd be looking in it, and I would expect the folks that we work with in Washington should be able to help us with trying to find some of those places where those opportunities might be there. George, you want to?
Yeah, just a real quick follow-up on something that George Brown had mentioned about his request about the phasing of who and when goes where and what. My biggest concern is the courts and in the council chambers, the city manager's office. It's kind of like we should probably be the first ones to step off the ship and the first ones to board the new ship, because people need to know where we are. People need to know where the courts are. They have to have easy access. So in making those decisions, I hope that we look for something that's very accessible to the public, easy to find, and has enough room to put the people in there that are necessary. So that was just one request. And in going through this project that was presented to us, I kind of like the clock tower idea. The clock tower. They had a clock tower with Eugene City Hall and letters on the side of it. So I think that'd be kind of a good thing to have. It's just my own personal request. Thank you.
Start a list.
Well, let's put this motion on the table, George.
Okay. I move to direct the city manager to develop and implement a transition plan for moving all remaining city services out of City Hall by June 30th, 2012, and to develop a phased approach to building a new City Hall at the current site utilizing available resources.
I'll second the motion.
Moved and seconded. And Mike, did you have something else you wanted to offer?
Yeah, I did. For the sake of me remembering things appropriately, Mike, you summed up by saying that certainly that the eWeb site was probably less expensive, but that it was the wrong place, and one other thing. What was it you said?
I said the eWeb site is less expensive than a fully consolidated new city hall.
But the other part you said,
right.
but it was the wrong place, and one other thing.
Wrong place. That was the only. I think those were the only two pieces.
All right, because I heard at least a couple councilors say that they liked the place. So I was just trying to keep track of that.
I tried,
Thank
Mayor.
you.
I tried.
Okay.
So the problem with eWeb, in my opinion, is that if there's a possibility for it to be redeveloped into retail or apartments, that is more,
Combination.
that to me would be a better use of that property. Not to say that it shouldn't stay public, part of it, open space, access to the river, all the things that we all hold dear. But my challenge is to, and I've heard it said at this table by people who are concerned about us buying things that turn into white elephants or that we end up not getting tax base on. And that's one of my concerns, is the more public property that is in our community, the less of a tax base is what we have. And that's my biggest challenge with it.
Well, I personally really like the eWeb building, and I like it being used for the purpose that it's being used for, with its access to the public. So that's stay there.
Stay tuned, I guess.
All righty, let's. If you're ready to vote on this,
Madam Mayor, Alan's got something to say.
Yes, Alan.
Just for the record, I'm not supportive of moving City Hall into the UR building.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
All righty, so we're ready to vote on the motion that Councilor Brown put on the table. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Councilor Zelenka?
Yes.
6 in favor, and in opposition? 1 in opposition. Maybe we could find a... No,
Thank you.
We got another motion.
Hey, I'm trying to be nice.
We do have another motion, right?
Here's another suggestion. I move to direct the city manager to return with a funding plan for the project.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of that motion, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Counselor Zelenka?
Yes.
A 7 in favor, none in opposition. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the conversation, and thank you for the beginnings of the beginning here. Thank you very much.
Get the trailer out.
All right.
Who was the one?
No, we're aiming for
It was Mike Clark.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Did you copy that?
Who was the one no vote?
It was Mike
Who do you
Clark.
think?
Okay. Next up is Civic Stadium, and talk about, this has been something that we've been, had some previous discussions about, and the school district is getting to the point of making their decision about the future of that piece of property, and so Councilor Brown in particular has wanted us to have a thoughtful discussion about what role we might want to have in this. So, City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll just turn over to Sarah for a brief introduction.
Right. Good afternoon. So I'll have an equally brief introduction and just leave your time mostly for your discussion. What I want to walk through your AIS just a little bit, because what's in here and what was left at your table is a brief history of kind of where we're going, a little bit of a summary of the proposals that have been given to 4J, and then Councilor Brown had asked for some additional information about parkland acres by ward and other questions that you see, and so those are also included, and we can walk through any of those, and I can answer, hopefully, most of the questions related to that. But really, just briefly in a nutshell, as you know, the Emeralds left Civic Stadium in 2009, and that was kind of a significant moment where we started talking about the history or future of Civic. And so in June, the school board had decided that they were going to surplus the property, go out for RFPs, and see what might come of that. They did that in October and left it open for a pretty significant amount of time through February, and had 3 different groups come together with proposals that I've really just quickly summarized, and if you've been following the media at all, you probably have even more details than this. But really, the first one is from the Save Civic Stadium group, and they're proposing to save the grandstands, put in a larger turf field for professional soccer or other uses, and some other mixed use there, along with a restaurant and other possibilities. The Eugene YMCA has put in a proposal that would include a new Y that would replace their South Eugene facility. It includes parking, tennis, and also some housing for students. It's a partnership effort. And the last one on your AIS is a proposal by Master Development and LLC and Powell Development. Theirs is another mixed-use development that has a large anchor store of Fred Meyer, as I've seen in the paper, as well as some other restaurants, possible housing, parking. So those are the 3 that the staff, if you read the paper this morning, the staff, or yesterday, the staff have gone through and they've ranked those. The school board will see them tonight. So the school board hasn't seen the full proposals. They'll see them tonight, and they'll set a timeline for how they're going to make their decision. What we think will happen is they'll make a decision sometime around May. But that's really, I think, it. And I think everybody that is represented in this room is all the proposers and 4J. So we have a good group here. Include Steve Nystrom is also here, because I wasn't sure if your questions were going to be around parks, land use, or what. So we're prepared to answer any and all.
Okay, thanks for that. All I would add to that before we start calling on people is I would just want to point out that early on, even before the M's moved to, or PK Park appeared on the horizon, we as a city tried to be part of a conversation about whether Civic could be saved and that the M's would remain at Civic, but that the decision was made to move past that. I also just want to say that I think I can say this safely to speak for all of us, that we're very sympathetic to the funding needs that the schools have, and them trying to do the best they can for the schools with this piece of property. And I think I speak for all of us that we have interest in this property meeting the school's needs, but also meeting the community's best needs, and some convergence of both of those things. So with that, I'll look around the table. George Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm the one that requested this work session. That was on December 9th. So we're a little late. Took a while to get to this point. We missed the deadline for proposals to eWeb. The city staff and the manager's office have been super busy on Envision Eugene. It's not anyone's fault that we missed the deadline. It's just everyone's been super busy on a lot of other projects. That was also the date that I asked for a work session on the 4J funding situation, and we, as a council, were busy working on the income tax proposal. And now that these things are kind of out of the way, we can look at Civic again. I will tell you, when I first heard a couple years ago about the possibility of Civic being torn down, that's my old neighborhood, and I was just horrified. I was heartsick, as were many of my neighbors in that neighborhood, and it was just a terrible thought to tear down this historic building, since we've already lost so much of our architectural heritage, especially downtown, and there's really not very much left from the past. There's Civic Stadium. There's the post office downtown. There's the eWeb Industrial Building on their site by the river, which has got some really cool architectural elements and should possibly be saved. There's just not a lot that should be saved anymore. We got rid of most of it. On Monday night, the friendly area neighbors voted unanimously with one abstention to direct the city to buy the property from 4J and lease it to Save Civic and perhaps the Y, do ground leases for them. I was saying that neighborhood, there's overwhelming sentiment for preservation. My old neighborhood, Jefferson West Side, it's the same. I haven't done a poll, but I still know lots of people that live there. I see them at my place of business. I run into them on the street. I will tell you, it is overwhelming desire to save that stadium. So, given that, and then I looked at a map that we had at one of our other work sessions, and it showed parkland in each ward. And I normally don't think this way. Like, my ward doesn't have this, but it's got this, and your ward has more than my ward has. I usually don't think that way. I try to think what's good for the whole city, But I couldn't help but notice, so I asked for some facts and, some data. Here it is. If you look at this, you will see that Ward 1 has the lowest amount of public space, of park space, by a significant factor. The next one up is twice as much. It's way below most of the other neighborhoods by 75% or more. So this makes me think, Civic Stadium, perfect parkland for my ward. I'll need another round, at least one more.
Call you soon. All right, Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I got you, Alan, too. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, this is something that I've felt pretty strongly about for a long time as well, and worked with George and with others as well early on, and spoken many times about the value I thought this was to the community, and also the opportunity that I thought Civic Stadium presented to the community for people who don't always agree on everything to come together. I thought for a very long time it was that. I think the newspaper had it right when it said that this isn't just solely about money. This is about some other things, community nature. But it's, in these times, I think, mostly about money. And frankly, I look at the motion that George has put forward here, and I say, okay, I understand the value of forming a committee to try and see if, there's any last-ditch effort to do anything differently. But I don't know what the next step is from there, George, and I was perhaps hoping you could help me understand that with the intent of your motion. Because as near as I understand it, then what, if we formed a committee and came up with some kind of plan, we'd have to convince 4J not to sell it, or not to choose one of these other options, I suppose. Or maybe the committee would say we should choose this option or that one. Either way, we're about the process right now of asking the community something I'm sorry we're doing, but we're asking the community about whether or not they'd like to create an income tax. And if we're at all talking about city funds to play a part of buying this stadium or being involved in making the school district whole here, it would, I think, look rightly to the public as if that income tax may be for the purposes of buying the stadium. And that would be a great concern to me. I would not like to see us doing that. So I'm concerned about what's the next step after we form this committee and try and come up with a plan. I think the plans that are in place are good based on what the school district has asked for, and I'm interested to see their discussion on it, but I really would love to know what you want to do next after we do this motion.
Andrea?
Thank you, Mayor. So this is an interesting conversation. This came to us because George asked for a work session on this, and he got several counselors in the affirmative. I don't remember if I voted on that one or not, but this is, I honor Civic Stadium for what it is, but I also wonder what dogs we have in the fight here. We don't have the money to purchase it outright. We don't have the money to maintain it. It's I don't normally agree with Mike, but I do agree that if this is property that the school district owns, and they are hurting. And I personally don't want to stop anything that's going to not help them meet their bottom line any sooner. The interesting thing about this map, George, is that you mentioned that your ward has less acres of parkland, which is true. But we, in reference to how we would do that, to make it equitable across the wards would be interesting, because the wards are divided up by population base. And we're going to be going through that redistricting process here this next year, so it might look different in the next year. But I don't really have a problem with committees. I mean, I believe that we need input on things that we have decision-making powers in, but I don't think we have any decision-making powers in this process, personally, and so I wouldn't be able to support your motion, George.
So just before I call on George Polling, just for clarification, don't we have first option on this?
No.
Nope.
That's on the eWeb property.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Which we're apparently not going to. Sorry.
Beat that horse.
Yes, ma'am.
George Polling.
On the second page, actually page 3 of the handout, the Eugene Parks and Open Space Acres by Council Ward, what is meant by metro?
Metro Park would be something like an Alton Baker, big, large park that serves a larger metropolitan area than just a ward or section of the city.
Okay. So if you take the metro park out of Ward 4, that only leaves us with 68 acres of parks, and that's far less than anybody else has. So it's just a point I wanted to make on that, how numbers can be tweaked and twisted to either help or hurt your argument. The other thing is, I agree with both Mike and Andrea. Now this process that the 4J has gone through has been going on for some time. I think for us to step in at this point would be counterproductive. If this motion were to pass, I would hope that the subcommittee, since the Save Civic Stadium group was specifically stated in it, that we would, as parts of the subcommittee, that we would include somebody from the Y and then somebody from the Masters and Powell Development Companies, because otherwise I think it would be a very slanted subcommittee. So I know it says not limited to, but I think if one group is specifically identified, the other two should be. And, right now, 4J is strapped for cash. They're getting ready to put out a $70 million bond, or they're going to discuss putting out a $70 million, that's a $70 million bond in May for facilities, repairs, replacements, that kind of thing. We just got done talking about possibly going out and asking the people for money to help us do our phased redevelopment of a new city hall. Although all three of the proposals that 4J received, from what I can read, are very good proposals, it's 4J's decision to come down on which one they think is the best. Some of them, offer more cash than others. It's not all about cash. I think that the 4J decision makers on this have to look at all three projects very carefully, because they all have benefits, they all have drawbacks. So I think for us to stick our fingers in the 4J business at this time is a wrong move, and I think they did their due diligence on these projects, and it's up to them to decide.
Alan, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. To me, this issue is really about our heritage and our history. I've spent many a summer night at the Civic Stadium watching ball games, and really got a sense about how big of a great community it is, and community building thing it is. We don't have very many great places left. That's really a jewel, and the closer the decision got towards doing something different with it, the more I realized how valuable I think it is to the community. I don't like any of the options. All of them eliminate the stadium. I really prefer a fourth option along the lines of what George is talking about, where we buy it with some citizen support, some donations, and work on that, and invite the Y and Save Civic into seeing how we could make that work and keep the stadium. So I'm supportive of the motion. The motion basically just gets us an opportunity to look at it. It's not, I don't think, sticking our nose in their business. It's presenting another option that 4J didn't have the opportunity to, because we didn't have this option available to them at that time. So I'm supportive.
Okay, I've got Pat and then Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. The bottom lines, the bottom lines that we're looking at today in existing budgets really pale in comparison to the long-term vision, what we leave behind us. And in a few years, budget woes may or may not be forgotten. But in a few years, if Civic Stadium is gone, it will be on its way to being forgotten. Civic Stadium replaced a ballpark that was in Bethel that was it's now called the Field of Dreams. Great entry-level housing project. But I would hate to see this ballpark go the same route, as much as I am in favor of low-income housing and entry-level housing. So we need to be really deliberative about this. And we're not just sticking our nose into 4J's business. This is our business. This is the City of Eugene. We've just gone through a very extensive Envision Eugene process, which wrapped everything into it. It wrapped transportation, industrial property, commercial property. And that brings up my next question. As far as commercial property is concerned, City Manager, we have determined that we have enough commercial property inside the UGB to move forward for the next, until the 2031 plan, 2031 date. How does this 10 acres fit into the inventory that we are looking at right now?
Yeah, I don't know how specifically this acreage was evaluated in that. It would have been evaluated under its current zoning, is my guess. I think what we said with Envision Eugene is we can accommodate future commercial development within the UGB, but that's not based on current zoning. That would also include rezoning of some parcels to commercial from some of the smaller industrial parcels and potentially something like this.
This 10-acre parcel. So, and it's currently zoned what?
It's, right now it's zoned public lands.
Public lands.
And I think the Metro Plan designation underneath is multifamily. Right, R2? Yeah.
Well, prior to this meeting, and going on right now, is the Transportation CRG meeting over in the library, and I attended that for the first 45 minutes or so of the meeting. And the consideration of transportation throughout Eugene is under full evaluation right now. And one thing that did come up is transportation in that particular area. What is the transportation plan, and how do we support what's already there, let alone what is planned for the area? So it is our business. This is our business. This is the City of Eugene's business, because it's our transportation plan that we're looking at. It's our commercial property that we're looking at, and it really is it's incumbent upon us to weigh in on this and to make sure that whatever happens with this property does fit in with Envision Eugene, which is very extensive, and that's involved the entire community, including the education community, including 4J. And so we're not stepping out of line by weighing in on this project. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Chris next.
Put me in queue, too.
You're in.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because probably if I were going to parse it a little more, I would say, yeah, we have common interests. I mean, they are community interests, and we definitely have the same interest. And having been on the school board when we've wrestled with this issue before, I'm very aware of how Civic Stadium is a part of the larger discussion for not only the school district, but also for the community. The other piece of that, though, is around the issue of authority. And the city council doesn't have authority over this piece of property. So I think we can express our interest and we can be involved, but we really don't have the jurisdictional authority to tell the school district what to do. We've already tested that in court, and we lost. And so I think what we need to do is to be very thoughtful in terms of what influence we might have with the school district in terms of what we believe the long-term goals should be. And I've already indicated my willingness to talk with school board members, to encourage them to do whatever, but I probably stop short of trying to exercise any sort of a role that could be viewed as trying to be authoritative or jurisdictional in some way. And so I think the reason why I wouldn't support the motion is because of the implication it sends about trying to step into an authoritative role, which I don't think that's what George's intent is, but it can be viewed that way. But I do not want to step away from our interests in this site and my interest in terms of what I think would be a good use for the site versus not a good use for the site. So I want to be appropriate in the role we take, even if I don't try to be authoritative in the role we take. And then, interestingly, I'm really glad that, George, that you put this together, because when I looked at the map and I see Ward 1 and how many Ward 1s would fit inside Ward 8, geographically, in terms of square miles or acres, and then I look at the number of neighborhood and community parks, which is really what people think of when they think of parks, the places they go to recreate. You got 76 acres in your teeny tiny Ward 1, and I've got 29 acres in my great big Ward 8. You've got a whole lot more community than I do. So it's interesting how these kinds of things shape out. So it's not like an accusation, but it really is kind of an interesting observation that parks are measured in different ways. And so how we look at how we distribute things really is both geographic use and a variety of other ways. It was an interesting exercise. I'm glad you did that. But back to the original point, I don't think I can support the motion, but it doesn't mean I don't support the interest. And I would want to work to see what kind of influence we could have without trying to be authoritative with regard to the school district.
Got another round with George Brown and George Polling and Mike and Pat, and before that, I just want to say that you may, if you chose, you could tinker with the language to some extent, because you could exercise not any kind of authority whatsoever, because we don't have it. You could choose to have some kind of advisory capacity with putting another element into the discussion. So, I mean, that is something that people could choose to do. So I think that's what he was leaning toward. So, okay, George Brown.
Yes, Mayor, that's correct. Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, we have no legal authority here. That's, no one is even hinting at that. We have moral authority. We have moral authority. If we look at Envision Eugene, the pillars of Envision Eugene, go to page 9, and it's underneath the pillar that says protect, repair, enhance neighborhood livability. The very last paragraph says, recognize the value that historic properties contribute to community character and livability, and work to preserve those properties. That's the intent of this motion. Like I said, we just don't have a whole heck of a lot left. We've torn most of it down. And this is one of the few. This is a gem. And the intent of this committee, we're not voting today on let's buy Civic Stadium. That's not on the table today. We're not saying let's lease it. We're not saying let's tell 4J what to do. All we're saying is let's look at this one more time. Let's slow down. They're not going to make a decision until probably May or June, possibly. It's known right from the get-go that 4J said, yes, they won, the court case. But they said, no matter what, we're going to go as far as we can to make sure that we protect, we're supportive of saving the stadium. They don't want to go against the will of the community, in other words. That's how I remember their talk at the time. They want to be good neighbors. They want to make sure that the community values aren't trampled on. It's the last thing that 4J wants to do. So I do feel that we have some moral authority here. I'm not suggesting that we lord it over them or anything. I mean, it's the art of friendly persuasion. That's what I'm looking for. Friendly persuasion here. But to do that, we need a group of us. We need to sit down one more time. Maybe it can be collaborative. When in the motion it says, private, public, nonprofit. This could be Save Civic Stadium. This could be the Y. This could be there's another pillar in here relating to affordable housing. There could be some affordable housing units along Amazon, depending on how you configure the map. There's different interests that could play here, and, I'll probably need another round. So it is our business, really. But I like to emphasize that I'm not suggesting that we lord it over 4J. By no means. We're not in a position to do that anyway. And we're not really voting on spending any money today. We're just voting to, let's look at it one more time. I remember when we were discussing the purchase of Arley Park, several councilors said, gee, in the future, people will go by this and say, gee, they could have bought it, but they didn't do it. That's what I'm afraid will happen with this. People will drive by that site and someone will say, there used to be an old ballpark here, but they decided not to save it.
George Foley?
Mayor, can I get in the queue?
Yes. George Foley?
No, I'll go ahead and pass, never mind.
Okay. Mike?
George, thank you for answering my question, which is what's the purpose of the motion? Because I absolutely agree with Chris that, yeah, we have an odd balance here. We have an interest and we have a larger community responsibility, but we don't actually have authority. And so the appropriate role for us to explore all options before the clock runs out for the sake of the community, okay, I could get behind the idea that people are going to talk about and brainstorm and what if. Although I don't know to what degree that becomes almost bad faith to those who've worked pretty hard to put in some proposals, understanding the process to be what 4J had outlined. Can you tell me, Mr. Manager, specifically when 4J is going to make a decision?
It's not specific. They're going to discuss it tonight, so I think after tonight, we'll be able to get more information from 4J.
So you don't know whether they're going to make a decision tonight or not?
I think what they're doing tonight is deciding what the rest of the process and the timeline will be. It's anticipated that it will probably be sometime in May, but they haven't had that discussion.
Well, I appreciate the work that has gone into all three of the proposals that are put forward to 4J right now. But I too see a community value in that stadium staying. I see a community value in us saving that historic property. And so I guess I could support a reworded motion to have some subcommittee of the council of some nature looking at other options. One, for example, that, if this was going to be brought to the council at all for the sake of city resources, which, as I mentioned, I have some questions about. A question that rises to the top for me is we own a civic golf course, the city does. And so I wonder to myself, does it make more sense for the city to own a civic golf course or a civic stadium? And certainly, I guess, if we wanted to trade one for the other, perhaps that's a brainstorming idea. I don't know. But I guess I could support a reworded motion here that would look at all of the potential options.
Pat?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. One, 4J won't be making a decision on this tonight. They have a decision on something that's about 20 times more dollar value than this particular project that's going to happen tonight. About 20 times bigger than this. So regarding authority, if the zoning is to change on this from public land to whatever, does the city council weigh in on that?
Potentially.
Indeed, we do have some form of authority here. So whether or not it's a kind of authority that we like to laud or use as a hammer, we do have authority on this, and we do have responsibility on this also. I'm going to support the motion. I think that, and I would hope that other councillors would support the motion, that this isn't necessarily proposing a city partnership. It's not necessarily proposing city ownership of the site, just exploring further possibilities and having the city council weigh in on what maybe is an appropriate use for the site for the future. So I am going to support the motion. I hope that people do support a reworded motion that removes any hint of authority. But let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at the bigger picture. And if a super shopping center is the right thing to have there, well, let's have another super shopping center. But let's do it deliberatively and judiciously. Thank you.
Andrea?
Thank you. Interesting conversation. So my first question, John, is the RFP process closed?
Yes.
So that would be my first part of the motion change that I would have to have in there before I could support it, is that if 4J is willing to reopen the RFP process, and if we submit something, if they're willing to work as part of the process, I don't think that it's fair to the people that got their proposals in on time to have us come behind them and say, sorry, we're going to do this instead. So that would have to happen to me. And if they're not willing to open up their RFP process again to allow us to perhaps enter into this conversation with them, then I believe that it would be a waste of staff time, which is something that drives me crazy, is when we send staff off to do work that we know we're not going to support in the long run, i.e. the EWEB project. So that would be the first thing that would have to happen, is 4J would have to be willing to open up their RFP process to allow this to continue to happen. And then I would definitely want it to, and the language is what it is, but the other part of it is I do agree that there needs to be more, and I'm not willing to be on this committee, by the way, George, more business community that is trying to look at different ways, and the people that put in the RFP also. I mean, I think that if it's going to be community, it's going to be community.
So before, Alan's next, but before Alan, I just wanted, the thing for you to think about is whether your intention is to put an RFP in, or whether you're just going to want to weigh in on the existing RFP so that the school district knows how the council feels about it, which is a different thing. Alan, your time.
Yeah, I support everything that's been said up to this point. When I read the original motion, I didn't see it as us putting out our authority, although we do have the ultimate authority in that we need to approve the zone change, which I think would be required for 2 of the 3 proposals. But I would support a reworded one that made people comfortable and got Mike and Chris and other folks on board, and Andrea, to be able to support moving forward with putting together a small committee that would come up with an idea that could be a counter proposal, whether it be within the RFP or not. I don't care about that, but and I would be willing to participate on that small committee.
Chris, you're next.
Yeah, I appreciate the zoning thing. That's a very important aspect to it, so I appreciate that a lot. Andrea raised a really good point, is if the 4J school board is already going through a process and they're at a certain point down that line, and what we're proposing to do somehow interferes with that would be a challenge. And so I think if we could reword this in such a way so that it was a request to them that they consider it, or that it be something that they think about, or that they'd be willing to participate in, that might be something I could support. But for us to form a committee when they're already on a trajectory, what's the point? What does that accomplish, particularly since they have the authority at this point? So I'm willing to look at supporting something, but not something that throws a monkey wrench into a process that they've already got underway with their own authority. I agree with the concept. I agree with the idea. It would be nice if we could be involved in what happens on that site. But we have to be real mindful of where we are. So with that in mind, one question I have is there a reason why we would have to act on this today? Is there a decision pending or something that's happening immediately that the formation of this committee would need to be involved with right away, or is it something that we could form? I realize we're going on break tomorrow, but could happen, say, by April 11th or on April 11th. Maybe it would give us time to talk to the school district and say, are you willing to entertain this kind of a committee being involved? And if so, we could form one on April 11th and go from there. But I'm reluctant to create a committee now when we don't even know where it would fit into their process or whether or not it would fit into their process. But if we were willing to wait, we formulate it, talk to the school districts about it, I could very easily support something that was acceptable to the district and really actually moved us in a collaborative way down the court.
Well,
Well, John is here, but I don't know if there's anybody else from 4J here. No?
Okay, so we have George Brown and then Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, my suspicion is I think 4J would welcome our input on this. I mean, the city's going to bat for them right now. We're trying to raise them $40 million to retain teachers and instruction days. So I don't think they will see this as a hostile move on our part at all whatsoever. The idea is, the motion says being aware of the needs of 4J School District. We want to take care of 4J. We want to make it work for them in the best way possible, and we want to save Civic Stadium. I would like to see the committee be composed of people who want to save Civic Stadium, not people who want to tear it down. To me, that's just like, gee, why? There's going to be, we'll hear enough opposition from, the people that think that's a bad idea. We'll hear from that during the course of the committee's work, and there are probably some people on the council who will vote against whatever the committee comes up with. So there are checks in place. It's not like this work is going to be set in stone. It's going to be suggestions. It's going to be friendly persuasion. It's going to be try to come up with other ideas that satisfy 4J and preserve Civic Stadium. And if the YMCA can be involved in that mix, I think that would be terrific, too, because that's recreation. And this is what the property was to be used for initially, anyway. And the money, it is an issue of timing. I think we need to go ahead and do this, because I'm willing to work through our break on this. I'm willing to meet however many times a week we need to move this forward, so that because that will hang 4J up, because they'll be taking a more in-depth look in April in 2 meetings, according to their own material. They're going to look at it more in depth. They've got their hands full right now. They're just getting, my understanding is, a fairly brief introduction to it tonight. They've got a full slate tonight. They're going to be there probably late. And I think that we do have the money, if the recommendation of the committee, which we don't know what that committee would do yet, if their recommendation was to purchase the property, my understanding is we have about $8 million left in the park bond fund. Does anyone know?
Sounds close. I don't know the exact number.
I think that's about what's left over after the Arley purchase. So there is money to purchase it. There's $0 to do anything beyond that. We do have money to purchase it. That's my understanding. Times are tight. Yes, I agree. You know what? They were pretty tight in 1938. When the stadium was built. The whole community came together, the citizens, the city, and the Chamber of Commerce. They each pitched in a third, and they made it happen. And the WPA donated the labor. Local businesses donated all kinds of materials. That can happen again. But it can't happen if we tear it down. That's the simple fact. Once it's down, it's down. That's it. It's history. So let's spend a little longer and look at it again.
Okay, I'm going to have Mike and Andrea, and then we'll put a motion on the table and see what happens. Okay, Mike.
My first question was, what was your hope that we'd get to after this motion? What was the point, or where would we go from there? I also have had concerns and share the sentiments that are expressed on this side of the table here. And the more I listened to that, I really wasn't giving adequate weight previously to the idea that 4J already has a process, and the folks that are sitting in this room have complied with that in good faith. And if we're asking for these same folks and for 4J to become part of some new subcommittee, we're essentially asking them to abandon the process that they've already begun in good faith and go to a new process. And I'm not comfortable doing that, and I'm not comfortable asking 4J to abandon a process that they've begun, and I'm not comfortable asking the folks in the room with those three parties who've worked hard to present their RFPs in good faith to abandon them and start something new. I would be in favor of an idea that perhaps there's a way that some subcommittee of interested folks from the council could look at how to add to any of those particular proposals and add wisdom to 4J's decision, because it is a community process in the end. But I can't support anything that's going to ask them to abandon a process they've begun put in place and have had others participate in good faith.
Okay, Andrea?
So I'm just curious, George, how you're going to incorporate this, how you're going to change this motion to get my vote. I really want to know if 4J wants to participate in this. That's the deal killer for me. If you can go to them, if the motion can say something along the line of their willingness to work with us and to allow us to do this work, passes their muster, then I will support it. But if, in the same sense, I will support it for you to take to them and for you to ask them that, and if they say no, then it's dead in the water. That would be what I'd like to see, because I feel very strongly about that. You know, we didn't step up, or the council didn't step up and get it together to get to them before the RFP process closes, and I do think that that we need to follow. They need to follow their own rules, and so if they're willing to work with us, then fine, and if they're not, then I think we need to let it go. And I don't disagree that it's not a community value. I don't disagree with the historical aspect, and I understand the whole thing about historical buildings, but I just feel like we can only do so much within the city, and when people question my moral compass, that's when I just feel like, I don't know if that's really the right way to go, because I'm not saying that it's not it guides me personally, but I feel strongly that of a lot of these things that I already said, that especially around the financial part of it. So if 4J is willing to work with us, and if they're willing to allow us to do this, then I'll be glad to support the motion. But with the same sense, if they decide not to, then I think we need to let it go.
So a motion with the contingency.
So, George, you have a motion you want to put out here?
Well, I have the motion, but I'd like one more response to.
My only concern is we're at 10 minutes after, and if you're going to put a motion or try to craft one with these folks that you think it's going to
All right, I see what you're saying, sure.
We need to
Okay.
get going on
I get it. All right, here's my motion.
And Glenn will help you if you can.
Winner's on deck.
Here's the motion. I move that the City Council, recognizing the value that historic properties contribute to community character and livability, and being aware of the needs of 4J School District, request the mayor to form a subcommittee to explore a possible public-private nonprofit collaboration for the repair and repurposing of Civic Stadium and the redevelopment of the rest of the site. The subcommittee should include, but not be limited to, members of the Save Civic Stadium Group, one or more city councilors, 4J board members, and/or 4J staff.
Here a second.
Second.
That's the motion.
I know, but you need to add more to it if you want my vote.
That's what we're talking about now. I had to read the motion. Now we can talk
amendments
about
now, if anybody has
No, I'm
one.
not going to amend it.
I wonder if the attorney has a suggestion.
I have a suggestion that would address what Andrea and a couple of you had talked about, which would be to add at the front of the motion, so before what George read, something like, I move that the city manager ask 4J whether it would be willing to accept input from the city council on use of the Civic Stadium site. If 4J indicates a willingness to accept such input, then the mayor is requested to appoint a committee to develop a recommendation for the council regarding possible input to 4J, and then it would carry on with the, and here's what the committee would do.
I'll accept that.
Okay, so it's had a friendly amendment there?
I have another friendly amendment, Mayor.
Well, let's hear it.
And that would just to add someone from the Y onto the committee.
You
YMCA.
take that as a friendly, George?
All groups who put in RFPs would be mine.
George?
I'll accept the why. I just kind of like the people there that want to save the stadium. I mean, it's
Matt?
not. I keep saying this is advisory only. We can't tell 4J what to do, but we can present them with perhaps some beneficial
Just a
suggestions.
second, the motion just said, say but not limited to.
Yeah, it says not limited to.
All right, so so that's been accepted as a friendly, so now it currently includes everything that Glenn said, plus adding the Y. Glenn, is that correct?
Yes, that's what's on the table
That's
at the
what's
moment.
on the table right now. Okay, so we have Mike and then George.
George was first.
All right, George and then Mike.
I can't support this for two reasons. One, we're still asking the 4J school district to change the rules in the middle of a game. And that's one thing that this council was accused of many times in the past. We ourselves here at this table have worked hard not to continue on changing rules in the middle of the game. And I think for us to turn around and ask 4J to do the things that we were, as a council in the past, put down for, I think it is wrong. And second, I think that this committee, it's already predestined what the outcome's going to be, and that's not a true process. By limiting, by not allowing or limiting who you're asking to join, I think you're predestined to come up with a decision. The RFP was everybody submit their ideas. 4J will pick the best idea that they think is best for the for them, for 4J, and for the area. I earlier had suggested that if the Civic Stadium people are involved, so should the Y, as well as people from the two development corporations. Yet it's not willing to accept that as a friendly, so I move to amend to also include an invitation to Master Development LLC and Powell Development Company to be members of this subcommittee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion on that? All those in favor? Oh, you want
I'd like to, I just brief, if they could say, yes, we'd like to repurpose our proposal to saving Civic Stadium, I'm down with that. That's the whole intent of this committee is to...
George, you said you would accept that as a friendly. It doesn't need to be
I will accept it. I'll accept it.
You'll accept that as a friendly?
I will.
You withdraw your...
Yeah.
Mayor, did the seconder...
Yeah, Mike, I think so, yeah.
It's starting to get a little bit clumsy, speaking as a seconder right now, but I guess the word's not limited to really allow for anybody to be involved in this. And I'm not particularly comfortable with asking that people be specifically against raising the stadium. I think open minds in the discussion is more important for this committee.
All right, so currently it has in it the addition of the Y and the development groups have both been accepted, plus the word changes that you put in. Mike?
Thank you. I want to get clear on the intent of the motion, because I'll support one that allows for, if 4J wants our opinion and wants thoughts that are perhaps, make sure before we take this big step, we talk about every possibility. I'm happy to support that. If the intent is to preclude one of those options, if the intent is we're gonna ask 4J to go counter to their process, which is to put out an RFP and accept whatever they think is most acceptable, whether it's tear the stadium down or no, then I can't support that option, so I need to hear your intent clearly. I don't want to short-circuit their process.
Well, I'm not asking them to short-circuit anything. It was an issue of timing. We were involved with other things. We missed the little window there for getting the RFP in by, what was it, February 1st was the date? We're still working on the school income tax for 4J. So I feel that this is not going to be a big thing for 4J to listen to what the committee, whatever the results, the committee comes up with. I don't see a big problem there. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to clarify, I guess is.
I would just add to that, Mike, that in your motion, it's the first
Preamble.
says that 4J has to find this acceptable. So it's in the motion.
Yeah.
And everybody is invited to participate.
And everybody's invited to participate.
Yeah.
For predetermined decisions.
Thank you, Mayor.
Just quickly, for me, what makes this okay to support is the preamble, which says, if 4J says, no, we're really not interested, it's done. We're finished. If they say, interesting idea, yeah, let's pursue it, then we can do something. So for me, the preamble is what makes it okay. 4J still gets to decide whether they want to play or not. And for me, that's okay. That's what makes this acceptable.
All right. So I think we're ready for a vote. Do you want to read it, the
There's
whole
no
thing?
amendments, we're all friendly.
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me to do that. Okay. And so this is going to try to merge the two, which had some overlap in them. I move that the city manager ask 4J whether 4J would be willing to accept input from the city council on use of the Civic Stadium site. If 4J indicates a willingness to accept such input, then the mayor is requested to appoint a committee to develop a recommendation for the council regarding input to 4J. The committee should include, but is not limited to, members of the Save Civic Stadium Group, one or more city councilors, the YMCA, the Master Development LLC, Powell Development LLC, 4J board members and/or 4J staff. The council recognizes the value that historic properties contribute to community character and livability and is aware of the needs of the 4J school district. The committee would explore a possible public-private nonprofit collaboration for the repair and repurposing of Civic Stadium and the redevelopment of the rest of the site.
Did you say that again?
No. But the minutes recorder would be happy to read back whatever it was I just said.
All right, ready to vote? Yes.
I'm going to explain real clearly. I'm not going to support the motion, and the reason is because the very last sentence clarifies that the intent is to save the stadium, and some of the proposals don't. So that precludes
What's the point of the committee?
those particular proposals and changes the process.
Alan, did you want to make a comment?
Well, I mean, the whole point of coming up with more input is different input that's already been had. So I guess I missed the point. I'll vote yes.
Okay, we're going to vote. You'll get to vote when we vote. We're going to vote now. All those in favor indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alan makes 5. And in opposition, 2. It passes. With that, we are finished with the work of the day.
2 opposed.
It was Mike and I.
Happy spring break.
Thank you.
No more trouble for 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
Cancun, never heard of it.
Right into